The term inflation describes a long-term, widespread increase in the cost of products and services throughout the economy, which reduces both consumers' and businesses' purchasing power. In other words, a dollar will not buy as much today as it did yesterday. Take a regularly used item and compare its price over time to better understand the consequences of inflation. Annual inflation in a healthy economy normally ranges between 2 percentage points, which economists view as a sign of pricing stability. Furthermore, when inflation is within acceptable limits, there may be positive consequences. On the other hand, when inflation starts to outpace wage growth, it may be an indication that the economy is in trouble. The video is going to be very interesting, so make sure you stuck at end. Before we continue to our video, make sure to smash the like button, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell icon to never miss any of our future uploads. Now let's get started. There are two primary types of inflation: demand pull inflation. It happens when the demand for goods and services in the economy is higher than the capability of the economy to produce them. In other words, it's when there's a shortage of goods and services. For example, the market for brand new automobiles bounced back from the precipitous drop it experienced at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic much more quickly than anyone had anticipated. However, because there was a shortage in the supply of semiconductors during this time, the automotive industry found it difficult to keep up with this renewed demand for their products. Following that, there was a shortage of new vehicles, which resulted in an increase in price for automobiles of both the new and the used varieties. Cost push inflation. It takes place whenever the cost of the products and services used in production goes up, which in turn leads to an increase in the price of the goods and services that have been completed. For instance, the price of commodities skyrocketed during the pandemic and reached all-time highs as a result of drastic shifts in demand, buying patterns, cost of service, and perceived value across a variety of industries and value chains. This caused the price of commodities to reach all-time highs. As a means of countering the impacts of inflation and minimizing their effect on financial performance, industrial firms were expected to consider price increases that would be passed on to their end consumers as a means of compensating for the consequences of inflation. Reasons of inflation. One of the main causes of the pandemic, which is affecting many nations worldwide, is inflation. When COVID-19 hit, nations all over the world were forced into lockdowns, forcing the closure of factories, offices, and many businesses. Most governments intervened during this time to offer significant investments and assistance in order to keep people out of poverty and to maintain the economy. In the UK, the furlough program, through which the government began paying many workers' wages, was the main source of assistance due to having fewer opportunities to spend, such as working from home and stores being closed. Many households accrued unforeseen savings. These savings poured out into the economy exactly as anticipated once restrictions began to loosen. The issue is that there simply aren't enough products to go around because there are fewer businesses operating with fewer employees producing fewer goods. This is because many countries around the world continue to face strict COVID-19 regulations, lack access to or uptake of vaccines, or continue to dip in and out of lockdowns. Despite the abundance of money, businesses are struggling to keep up, which is leading to an increase in prices. The ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine is one of the more recent inflationary factors. As a result, commodities and energy prices have increased, making it more expensive for us to heat our homes and fill up our cars. The disruption caused by Brexit is another issue the UK is dealing with. Many businesses are finding it much harder to get goods into and out of the country now that the UK has left the EU. Impacts of inflation. Households will see their money is worth less as customers all need to start paying more for necessities. After all, if everyone has to pay more for groceries, there won't be as much money left over for other expenses. Inflation, however, can be particularly difficult for retirees, homeowners, and savings. You can suddenly find yourself having to pay more with less if you've been saving for a while, are paying off a mortgage, or are drawing from a fixed pension account. Inflation last reached this high point 40 years ago. While some of you weren't even born when this happened, you might recall more contemporary occurrences like the global financial crisis of 2008. Inflation at the time was little over 5%. Savings accounts were no longer able to keep up with the increase in living expenses as inflation increased and interest rates decreased. Changing interest rates, or the amount of interest you will receive on your money when you deposit it in a savings account, is one of the most popular methods central banks and governments attempt to combat inflation. People will save more money and spend less if interest rates rise, which will theoretically result in lower pricing and fewer severe product shortages. However, this will also affect items like mortgages. A mortgage's payment amount may increase as a result of higher interest rates. As with any financial matter, it is crucial to seek wise, professional counsel. Getting clear direction is preferable to attempting to guess what to do next if you are unsure. Worse inflation in 2023. According to the findings of a recent comprehensive study conducted by the World Bank, in the year 2023, the global economy may be on the verge of entering a recession, which would be followed by a series of financial crises in emerging market and developing economies that would cause these economies long-term damage. According to the report, the trend of central banks around the world hiking interest rates this year has reached a degree of synchrony not seen in the preceding 5 decades. This pattern is expected to persist for a significant portion of the coming year as well. However, the trajectory of interest rate rises and other policy initiatives that is now envisaged may not be adequate to bring global inflation back down to levels experienced before the pandemic. Investors anticipate that global central banks would boost monetary policy rates to roughly 4% by the end of 2023, which would represent an increase of more than 2 percentage points above their average rate in 2021. The study indicates that if supply disruptions and labor market pressures don't abate, those interest rate hikes could leave the global core inflation rate, excluding energy, at roughly 5% in 2023, which would be nearly twice the 5-year average prior to the pandemic. The report's model suggests that central banks may need to increase interest rates by an extra 2 percentage points in order to reduce global inflation to a rate that is consistent with their aims. If financial market stress were to accompany this, global GDP growth would fall to 0.5% in 2023, a per capita contraction of 0.4% that would technically qualify as a worldwide recession. Solutions for inflation. The timing and magnitude of the effects that higher interest rates on the economy are very variable, making monetary policy a highly imprecise science. However, in order to combat inflation, central banks have chosen to raise interest rates, which in turn removes demand from the economy. The expectation is that although this could result in a moderate economic contraction, such an outcome would be preferable than the possibility of a more severe economic contraction occurring at a later date. This strategy has resulted in the steepest increase in U.S. interest rates since 1994, with short-term rates anticipated to peak at approximately 3.75% and the Fed funds rate poised to go as high as 4%. Both of these increases are likely to have a negative impact on economic growth in the United States. Since 2011, the Eurozone has had its very first interest rate hikes, and rates in the UK are also on the rise. Reform the tax code to raise more revenue. Because of the impacts they have on the level and distribution of income that is left over after taxes, the size and structure of the tax system have a substantial impact on inflation. This is the primary reason for this impact. Increasing taxes might have the effect of lowering demand in a way that is advantageous to distribution, which would result in inflationary pressure that is downwardly directed. Legislators can further bring inflation under control by limiting the tax expenditures and subsidy programs that are responsible for certain price increases in the economy. This is one of the ways that lawmakers can limit tax expenditures, limit discretionary spending, reduce consumption-oriented spending, and shrink aid to states. Reimposing discretionary spending caps to limit future spending growth, and reducing spending on various programs ranging from farm subsidies to Social Security benefits for high earners are all effective ways for policymakers to further moderate demand. Limiting the size of next year's appropriations, limiting future spending growth, and reducing spending on various programs are all effective ways for policymakers to moderate demand. In light of the $900 billion in federal money that was given to cash-flush state and municipal governments, lawmakers should also evaluate the possibility of decreasing certain forms of state and local financing. This is because the federal money was given to cash-flush state and municipal governments. Promote work, savings, and investment. Inflationary pressures can be alleviated to some degree by means such as increased labor supply, increased capital supply, increased productivity, and increased personal savings. It is possible for policymakers to reduce barriers to employment by, among other things, doing away with the Social Security earnings test, making it possible for workers over the age of 65 to collect the Earned Income Tax Credit, enhancing the work requirements of certain programmers, providing vocational training for disabled workers, and implementing other reforms. They could encourage people to save money by encouraging the purchase of bonds that are indexed to inflation, increasing the size of the saver's credit, or improving the tax preferences for retirement savings. They could also support investments by reforming regulations and receiving targeted funding from the federal government. Importantly, any gains in inflationary pressure will be nullified if efforts to offset new investments are unsuccessful because higher demand would cancel out higher supply. Hope you guys enjoyed our video. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon for more videos. Thanks for watching and have a wonderful day.